So today is our last day of the webinars. So we'll go back over some of the stuff that we've covered in the last 3 webinars, as well as look at this week's webinar, which is performance review, closing the due diligence loop. So we'll just, there's a few more people popping in now, but we'll keep pressing on. It's a beautiful day here where I am, and I hope it's a beautiful day for you too, wherever you are. And I just wanted to make an observation. I'm actually taking a week off next week, and I'm not answering emails or taking any calls. And I think during times of lockdown, it is actually really important to think about taking a break. It can seem a little bit at odds to think, well, I'm working from home or I'm not working as I would normally. Therefore, why would I want a break? But I think by working from home sometimes, or working in different circumstances, you can actually be kind of more available and bombarded by phone calls, bombarded by emails, and the additional stress of, you know, adjusting to a new circumstance. So I'd really encourage people to actually take leave like they would normally and give yourself a break, get away from the phone, get away from email, and just really have a little bit of a holiday, because I think that's something that people, you know, maybe don't think about or don't even think they're entitled to because they're not working in their normal circumstances. So I, for one, am taking a week off next week, and I'm actually going to have a complete and utter break from everything. And I think that's really important for everyone to do, to look after their mental health in these very interesting times. Okay, so yeah, look, please feel free to, you know, pop in comments or questions as we go along. Whether or not I'll get to them, you know, remains to be seen. We've got a few little polls happening in the session today, and we've got the last in the series of videos. And I wore Mary, the maintenance manager's flannel shirt for the session today. So just in case none of you realised that it was me as Mary. So let's get going. So last week, let me just, click here. So last time we covered off meaningful monitoring. What is meaningful monitoring? How do we monitor our contractors' safety performance? What should we monitor, and so forth? So why undertake meaningful monitoring? Essentially, what you're looking at is confirming compliance with your systems and safety arrangements. So where you've given instruction to a contractor that they're complying with those instructions. We're not doing it necessarily or primarily to assess their compliance with their own systems. Yes, there may be times where you want to do that, but primarily what you're doing with monitoring is saying, is the contractor doing what I've asked them to do? When is the best time to undertake monitoring? Well, as close to real time as you can get it. As I said, you know, the process of collecting licenses and checking off lists of licenses and registration of plant and all that kind of stuff before the work has commenced, or before, you know, the contractor's even attended site, can be sometimes pretty meaningless, because so often the people that turn up on day 1 are not the people that are going to be there at day 5, 10 or whatever. So the best way is to really try and make your monitoring as meaningful as possible in real time. So be on site, direct face-to-face, obviously difficult in times of COVID, but, you know, get photos, email, video or whatever sent through, but real-time monitoring is obviously best. What to monitor? What is critical to you? And what is critical to you is your risk management. So you are liable for managing the risks you pose to contractors. You have issued them with instructions, or you have site safety arrangements, and that's what you want to make sure that your contractors are complying with. And also what you are competent to monitor. So make sure that you really understand. So poor old Mary last time was up at the tank trying to work out if the tank was a confined space and whether or not there needed to be a confined space permit in place. She had no idea what she was looking at. And it was really just more of a frustration to the contractor, because, you know, he was trying to deal with her anxiety and she really didn't know what she was looking at. What do you do with the information? You know, it's a bit like performance review of staff and whatever. If you're going to monitor people's performance, you need to do something with the information. So give them feedback and take action. So action is, you know, opportunities to improve. It can be looking at things like termination of contract, which is what we're going to look at in this session in performance review. All right, so today we're going to have a look at webinar 4, performance review, closing the due diligence loop, and really informing your re-engagement or your ongoing use of contractors. So one of the things that, we're going to cover today, why undertake performance reviews, what is perfect performance review, how to conduct meaningful performance review, and then review outcomes and actions. So we've got a little poll here, and I just want people to answer yes or no. And the question is, do you currently undertake regular performance review? Now, I want to make the point, this is different to monitoring. This is not where you're going out and looking for the evidence of performance. This is actually bringing it together and saying, all right, I've done some monitoring, I've been out on site, I've talked to the contractor, I've talked to the people that are working near the contractor, I've looked at these things. What have I actually used that information to bring it together, to review their overall performance, to decide how we're going to go forward? So I'm going to launch the poll. I just clicked on it. So if you want to say yes or no as to whether you actually do, after you've done monitoring, undertake a formal performance review process with that information, which then informs, how you're going to go forward. All right, so we're getting votes. The no's are winning, okay, which actually doesn't surprise me. And I think it's probably pretty common for us to do monitoring and to then not really do anything with that information and consciously make a decision about, well, what are we actually going to, what's the outcome of that monitoring? So there's still a few people left to vote or who haven't voted. But look, we're looking at a higher number of people are saying no. And one of the issues with that is that, as we've discussed throughout the sessions, is that I'm going to end the polling now. So we've had about 80% of people voting. So one of the issues is that the obligation on principal contractors when they're using their contractors is that they do demonstrate a level of due diligence when they're first engaging them. And if you've undertaken monitoring that has revealed issues, or you have become aware of a contractor's poor performance, either in complying with your safety arrangements or where you have actually looked at their critical safety arrangements, and you don't do anything with that information, you're not acting with a level of due diligence. So you've essentially ignored the information available to you and continue to use a contractor where you know that they are not performing satisfactorily. So it is a really important part of the whole 4-pillar process and closes that loop. Okay, so why undertake performance review? And this is basically talking about that point. A principal contractor is required to demonstrate a level of due diligence when engaging independent contractors. Demonstrating due diligence when engaging a contractor requires that a principal contractor has made sufficient inquiries within their level of knowledge to confirm that a contractor is aware of their obligations to provide a safe workplace and affirms the existence of such. If we go back to pre-qualification, that's what we were doing there, is when we first have the relationship with the contractor, we are asking them, do you have your safety arrangements in place? And they are confirming that for us, which we then can rely on. But now we're at the other end of the spectrum where the contractor has actually been performing the contract. And we may well have gathered information about their performance, and we need to utilise that to inform how we're going to go forward or whether we're going to go forward with that contractor. Okay? Reviewing a contractor's safety performance is a method by which due diligence can be demonstrated. Okay, so it doesn't mean you fall back into going out there and inspecting everything and getting the swim and running through it as a shopping list and going, right, you know, what have you got in place? But it's saying, I'm going to have a look at your overall performance. And it's, you know, about what do we actually look at. And I'm just going to wait on that poll for a minute because we'll do it in a minute. But essentially, you know, what is performance review? So that's a critical process. Demonstrate you've closed the due diligence loop and confirm that you are satisfied that your contracts are performing as you expect, and provides evidence of duly diligent contractor selection, and is the opportunity to discuss what we as principal contractor can do to support our contractors to manage safety. So that introduces a second part to performance review, which is really saying, on the one hand, you've got information about how did they go, and you're utilising that to inform whether you have a relationship with the contractor going forward or not. And it's also an opportunity to say, well, what is it that we can do as a principal contractor to support our contractors to manage their safety more effectively? What are the barriers that we are putting up to our contractors managing their safety? So often, you know, there are examples of contractors saying, you know, they tell us to go and park in a designated area, but there's always other cars in our way and we can't park in that area, so we've got to park wherever. So it really is a double-edged thing about, okay, looking at their performance, but also looking at our own. I have got a quick question here. It's got, if not competent to monitor risks important to you, would you outsource monitors to an external competent auditor? I think what's important in that question is, if not competent to monitor risks important to you. I am extremely wary of auditors monitoring contractors in the context of Australian and international standards and so forth, because there are massive problems with how those elements are demonstrated and what, you know, and I share stories about, and I'm sorry if there are auditors listening in, because there are some great auditors, but I think there is a real problem in the auditing industry. Don't worry, I'm a registered auditor as well. But there have been some real issues with what it is that auditors are looking for and what is the evidence that they're seeking. I have a bit of a funny story about an auditor who pinged a client of mine who I was actually working for on the ground, and we got a non-conformance in terms of hazard management for the keys being left in a vehicle that had no engine. And so I had to have a little bit of a laugh about that. But yeah, so if you say, okay, what's really important to us, and a critical risk for us is that, you know, we're a hospital and we need to make sure that our contractor is managing their chemical safety properly. We are not competent to do it, then, you know, but we may well engage an auditor. But the reality is it's the contractor's obligation to do that. So I would be saying them, you don't outsource it, you ask the contractor to provide you with evidence. And this is for your critical risks. So again, don't take it on, don't say, right, we're going to get an auditor in to audit you. It's like, get them to do it and provide you with the evidence, because they own it. The auditor has a relationship with them and they're getting the recommendations about any improvements that need to be made. And, you know, again, you're treating the contractors as, you know, they're the ones that are responsible for making sure that they've got the appropriate systems in place. It says from Mark Bush, I would have thought that there is no need, as I am the site expert, reads very site-specific risks. Okay, I can see like there's a chat going on. Of course, if you're monitoring in relation to compliance with your own site-specific risks, absolutely. You should be competent to be able to monitor those things, so you shouldn't need to engage an independent person to do it. But I think the question was about if the contractor was engaging in, had a critical risk that you were particularly concerned about and you wanted to confirm what the contractor was doing, would you use someone external? It's the contractor's responsibility. Okay, so here we set up, there's the two elements of performance management. One is due diligence, and the other one is the opportunity to improve on both sides of the fence. Okay, so I've got a little video here, and this is the last video in the series, and we're just going to play it. I'll hit play, and it's Mary and Pete having a bit of a chat about Pete's performance as a contractor with Our Lady of Perpetual Anxiety.
Hi Pete, thanks for coming in. I thought it'd be really good if we could just have a bit of a chat about how you've been going with your safety while you've been working for us. Firstly, I really want to thank you for being so cooperative and giving me paperwork when I've asked for it, answering all my silly questions. And I just want to know, is there anything I can do to help you be more safe when you're doing your work?
Well, Mary, it's always a pleasure working for Our Lady of Perpetual Anxiety. I appreciate your concern for my safety. I will say having to provide all that paperwork was probably not very helpful to you or me. How about we have a bit of a chat before we start work, or when it suits you, and I can let you know if what we are doing is safe.
You know, that would be great, because I didn't really know what I was reading anyway with all that paperwork, and there was so much of it. I'm still not sure what a confined space is.
Mary, it's my job to manage mine and my staff safety, so you can rely on me to do just that.
Look, that's great. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is we did notice that some of your staff have been parking their cars in the staff car parks, and the staff have been getting a bit uppity about it.
Yeah, no worries, Mary. I will have a word with my guys.
All right, great. Look, I also wanted to say that staff generally have been saying, you know, your boys and girls have been great. They keep their work separate. Well, as far as they can keep the girls away from the premises. But, you know, there've been no incidents. Your housekeeping's been really good. You've let me know what's going on. And I will say, Our Lady of Perpetual Anxiety is a bit less anxious knowing you're our plumber.
Good, thanks.
I have to thank my friend Rob for acting as Peter the perfect plumber in this. He's helped me out no end. So look, and hopefully what I was trying to demonstrate there is it's a conversation about bringing together the material, raising issues, and then deciding about, you know, whether or not you're going to use that contractor going forward. I'm just going to have a quick here. So look, how to review. So how do we actually want to go about undertaking performance review? And as I said, this is not the monitoring phase. Monitoring is where you've actually collected some data and some information. This is where you're actually going to have a discussion about what you've actually found. So you want to involve relevant parties. So I might get people just in the chat just put in a bit one word about who do you think the relevant parties are in terms of reviewing a contractor's safety or contractor's performance in terms of safety. Now that includes compliance with your systems as well as anything critical that you want the contractor to actually perform. So I'm just going to open up the chat there. So we've got a company rep. So obviously, Mary was Our Lady of Perpetual Anxiety's company rep. So or do you mean the contractor's company rep? So team staff who work in areas impacted by the contractor activities. Yeah, I think that's really actually important because you're interviewing people that are working alongside the contractor, and they will very much tell you about, were they cooperative? Were they responsive to issues that were raised? You know, were they careful in how they went about their work, or, you know, were they complying with the site safety rules and so forth? Things like the contract owner or the principal contractor's rep, yep, absolutely. The project manager and the workplace health and safety staff. I mean, obviously your workplace health and safety staff are important in that they can provide you with advice and support about, you know, technical issues that might come up. So, you know, if you've got site safety rules, you know, why you've got them in place, where you're not sure whether there's been compliance or not, all of those sort of things. So, yeah, contract supervisor, workers, all that stuff. So we've got a lot of different people that we can potentially include in the performance management process. And really, it's just a matter of saying, well, whoever needs to be involved should be involved. Okay, so Involving relevant parties, you know, thinking outside the square and saying who needs to actually be involved in this. Obviously, reviewing your monitoring outcomes. And as I said, your monitoring outcomes include compliance with your site safety rules, cooperation. It may involve monitoring the contractor's arranged place. So if you're a school and you've said, look, you know, you need to make sure that you're, you know, securing your chemicals, or securing your plant or your equipment in a way that students can't get access to it, then you may well, you know, you could go and do inspections like that. You still don't want to be falling into the specific, you know, the details of what the contractor is doing in terms of managing their own risks, because that's their obligation. Obviously, raising and discussing concerns, including allowing an expectation of performance. I think a lot of what I see in terms of performance monitoring, or performance review, sorry, is it can be quite punitive, and it can be quite, right, we're here for me to talk about what you've done wrong, or what's gone wrong, and, you know, how you need to deal with that going forward. And this needs to pick up on good performance management principles that apply in the industrial relations space as well as in the safety space, which is, what's the performance you expect? So we've issued a number of site safety rules and you were required to comply with them. Where is the issue? We did observe that some of your staff weren't wearing their PPE as requested, or they were utilising the staff facilities. Can you explain to me why? So, oh, well, we didn't, the toilet facilities that were provided to us were inadequate, and therefore our people had to go and use the staff toilets or whatever. So allowing an explanation of performance. So it's actually an agreement, you know, and a discussion about what is going on and why the issues arose. 99% of the time, there are genuine reasons why people have been unable to meet your expectations. Then it's about, you know, restating what your expectations are. So agreeing on solutions if you can, restating your expectations, and then obviously taking action, which is providing an opportunity to improve right through to termination of engagement and not utilising that contractor in the future. Yeah, how can you assist in having an effective review if the contractor doesn't want to raise any issues in fear of receiving any future work? Look, it's true. It's actually true, and we need to be aware that part of the reason why, or a big reason why, contractors, you know, may not raise issues or may not push back on instructions they're being given is because they just want to cooperate to keep the work, and that's a cultural issue. We need to then say that that's a serious cultural issue we have with our contractors, and right from the word go, we need to be looking at the relationship we've got with them. And if you can go back to your pre-qual and right back in the beginning, it's about cooperation and saying to the contractor, I respect you, I respect your expertise, and I rely on you to provide your services to us and to manage safety. So, you know, that is a real cultural issue that may come up there. So look, at the end of the day, this is good performance management, not just for contractors, but for anybody. And I've been involved in the industrial law space as well, and it's really about providing the opportunity to raise issues, talk about them, and come to an agreement about how to move forward. Always with the proviso that if there are issues that can't be resolved, you know, you need to sometimes make hard decisions and say, we're not using that contractor again. Or we're terminating an agreement. And that's part of your diligence, acting with diligence. Okay. All right. I hear, do they get to review the principal contractor's performance? Absolutely. And that's what I was saying when Mary said to Peter, is there anything we can do to improve and help you manage your safety better? So, yeah, it needs to be a respectful two-way street. So what to review? as we discussed, you know, outcomes of monitoring exercises. So when you turned up on site, what did you see? When you asked for information to be provided or sent through, was it sent through? When you've spoken to the end users of a contractor's services, when you've conducted interviews or with other staff, you know, whatever monitoring exercises you've done, bring that information together. Obviously, lead and lag performance indicators, and as I said, seeking feedback from your own workers, other contractors, clients, and end users. So where else, so just on the little chat thing, can anyone else suggest who else you might seek information from about a contractor's performance? So what other things might you review? Other contractors on site, yep, subject matter experts, yep, within the company and business. So, yep, subbies for sure. So talking to subbies and making sure how they feel about how safety's gone, clients, all that kind of stuff. So it's really going outside of just sitting with the contractor themselves. Any incidents reported and the person managing the contractor, obviously. Yep, so how they found them, whether they were cooperative and so forth. So it's you know, getting some diversity in terms of who you might want to talk to. The interesting one with talking to their workers is that there might be a bit of anxiety about them being completely honest about what, you know, how the performance has gone around safety and so forth. But look, diversity in terms of who you talk to and what information you gather is really important, so that you can bring it all together and get a real picture of what's been going on. The key elements around performance review is really about, as I said, you know, bringing that information together, making some decisions about what you're going to do in response to the sorts of issues that they that you've identified, and whether or not you will actually continue to use that contractor or not. Now, I'm going to jump to this quote. I just wanted to put this quote up again because I want to make sure that, you know, performance review doesn't lead us back into taking control over a contractor's work, and we don't end up in a role where we are providing prescription around how they are to undertake their work. So this is the Bayard v. the Queen decision. Just because a principal has the legal right to issue instructions and it is possible to take that step, this does not establish that it is a step which was reasonably practicable to provide and maintain a safe working environment, even where the principal has knowledge of the risks and knows of ways to control such risks. So again, I want to confirm that, you know, when you're in your performance review, you're really deciding whether or not you're going to continue to have a relationship with a contractor, but also, you know, what you're going to do to improve their safety. But don't fall back into, okay, well, we better take control of them. You can, if people recall the Waco quick form case, you can take responsibility for them. You can issue them with safe work instructions, but there is a real risk around doing that. In terms of, you know, if there were to be an incident, you would certainly be, you know, significantly more liable. And the other thing is, if you come out of a performance review thinking, okay, well, we're not happy with performance, so we're going to continue to use them, but we are going to direct them. And I see this come up a little bit with people who use small contractors. The thing is that if you're going to do that, you need to go the whole hog. You need to say, right, here's a safe work method instruction. Here's the training that goes with it. And here's the supervision to make sure that you're complying. So you really are formally taking them under your wing in every way. It's not just about, you know, issuing an instruction and then walking away. Here we go. So we've got one here. Any interactions they may have with a regulator without your knowledge. I mean, obviously, if the regulator turns up and has an involvement with a contractor, you certainly want to know if that has occurred and what the outcomes have been. If any notices were issued, bearing in mind that having a notice issued is not the end of the world, it's an opportunity for improvement. But yeah, definitely if there's been regulatory involvement. Should the PR cover the quality, performance review cover the quality of the works delivered? Look, obviously in performance review, you probably look at financials, delivery, quality and safety. So it's not just about safety, but essentially, you know, you can include everything. Do we complete workplace health and safety performance review for every contract immaterial of risk? Look, you might say, well, you know, we have a company that's coming in and watering our plants, and so we're not going to be undertaking, you know, really frequent or very in-depth performance review. It's going to be fairly straightforward. I think that, you know, on an annual basis, if you've got a contractor that's ongoing, at least, you know, if when they renew their insurances and provide you with their new updated stuff, it's always a good idea to have a bit of a look at them and decide whether or not you're actually going to continue to use them. So again, if we just recap on that interpretation of the duty. So looking at, you know, the common law does not impose a duty of care on principal contractors for independent contractors engaged by them of the same kind which they owe their employees. So whenever you're undertaking monitoring and performance review, you are not doing it like you would do for your own employees. You know, it is not in any way like you would do for your own employees, because they are managing their own work. They are managing their methods of work. They are managing the risks. They are implementing their own solutions. And it is not for you to be, you know, directing that. And I think the whole approach with performance review can really be, needs adjustment in terms of saying, I'm not here to have a checkboard or whatever and, you know, tick and cross whether or not you've managed your safety. It's how did you go in terms of your overall performance? You know, again, this, you know, principal contractor who subcontracts work to a competent subcontractor is not subject to an ongoing general law obligation with respect to the safety of the work methods employed by the subcontractor. So again, your performance review and monitoring is not, there is no obligation for you to be out there checking how they're actually going about doing their work. And it is not reasonably practicable to require a principal contractor to implement, review or monitor the work methods of an independent contractor. I just want to ask people, and just put it in the chat because we haven't got it up as a poll, but just put it in the chat. Do you agree with that? It is not reasonably practicable to require a principal contractor, in most circumstances, to review or monitor the work methods of independent contractors. And this goes back to our first webinar, which talked about, you know, the impact of reasonable practicability. But here's a quote from a case, Stevens v. Broadrib Sawmill, which looks at the essence of a contract of service, and again that's around the independent contractor, is the supply of the work and the skill of a man. So essentially you're engaging a contractor because they are capable of supplying you with the work and they're skilled and able to do it. And there is no ground for imputing to the parties a common intention that in all the management and control of his own vehicle, that was in relation to this case, in all the ways in which he used it for the purpose of carrying their goods, he should be subject to the commands of the respondent. So again, the High Court was, you know, really looking at that observation with regard to understanding that, you know, your contractor is independent and therefore not subject to your supervision or monitoring. Leighton's and Brian Allen Fox. Once an activity has been organised and its operation is in the hands of independent contractors, liability for negligence by them within the area of their responsibility is not borne vicariously by the principal contractor. So, you know, these are the principles that are underpinning how we need to go about, you know, engaging and managing our contractors, and the sorts of performance monitoring that we do, or the performance review that we do. Just got a question here. What about the scenario when the principal contractor delegates work to a contractor in the principal contractor role because they have the labour capacity but not all of the special knowledge? E.g., the PC needs to train the contractor's employees in some of industry specific. I'm not quite following this question. It's a little bit complicated. So I will get you to email that to me again at a later time, Darren, because I can't quite follow it. Phoebe, can you hear me still?
Yeah, I can
Phoebe?
hear you. Yeah, I can hear you.
Great.
Yeah. It just keeps
All right.
in and out, that's all.
So we've got a bit of a poll here. So I want to look at the, so when you're doing contractor performance, I just want you to answer yes or no. Do you look at your own or contractor or the contractor's performance when reviewing performance? So just a yes or a no. So I'm going to launch the poll. So do you look at your own or your contractor's performance when reviewing performance? So you do look at your own, which is good. Okay, so I'll take that as a yes. 75% of people look at their own performance as well as the contractor's performance when reviewing performance, which is great. So it is really important that that obviously that is a big part of performance review. So we can be looking at our influence over how our contractors are going. And then poll 3. There's a series of little questions here, which I'll get you to have a bit of a go at. Poll 3, do you believe that contractors are responsible for managing their own safety? Answer yes or no. Do you feel confident implementing this in your approach to contractor management? So do you feel comfortable with the principles that we've talked about in this webinar series? And have you adopted any of the principles discussed in the series in your work practice? So I'm going to launch the poll, and then if you can just have a go at answering each one of those questions. So overwhelmingly, I'm going to end the poll. Overwhelmingly, people are comfortable that contractors are responsible for managing their own safety. That's a massive result. And actually really, really pleasing, because when I started talking about these principles 10 years ago, no one believed me. Pretty much everyone believed that they were responsible, or principal contractors were responsible for managing, or for contractor safety management. And if a contractor was to be injured on their site as a result of the contractor's tasks, the principal contractor would be held liable. So that is a very, very significant shift, which is absolutely fantastic. Do you feel confident implementing this approach in your contractor management? 80% of people do feel confident, so that's fantastic as well. I'd be very interested to hear from people about how you're actually going about that. And then 70% of people have adopted some of the principles discussed in the series. So that's a really pleasing result as well, in terms of actually getting, taking these principles and implementing them. And again, I'd really like to hear from people to actually understand how you've been using them in your workplace to bring about some change in terms of your contractor management. All right, so I just want to go down the bottom, and I'll go back to the chat. And I'll have a look at, some people are saying, yeah, when contractors can disrupt the business significantly, you cannot afford to hand the risk over to them. And this is where we talked about, you know, of course, risks that are critical to you, of course, you may well be intimately involved, not directing them how they do their work, but satisfying yourself that there's no risk posed to your business. So a classic example is the ammonium nitrate plant that I was working on. If a contractor was conducting their work in a way that produced a spark, we were all getting blown to kingdom come. So it was really important that contractors had the right information from the principal contractor to say, this is the kind of environment you are working in. You need to undertake your work in a way that will not produce a spark. Now, contractors need to work out how they're going to comply with that. And look, you might even extend to things like making suggestions about how they might, so things like mobile phones that, you know, produce a spark and so forth. But it is really about saying, where's your interaction with the contractor? How is it that they're going to impact on your business, and where should you, or where is it prudent to be getting involved? But essentially coming from a position of saying, you've got a contractor in because they're good at what they do. And that example again, you know, the contractor was required to write a safe work method statement or conduct a JSA for the change out of every single gasket across the plant. Now, this contractor was an expert shutdown contractor who knew exactly how to change out every gasket in the plant. So the process of changing out those gaskets was not what was relevant. What was relevant was that the contractor understood it was a highly explosive atmosphere, and that if they undertook their work in certain ways, that would pose a serious risk. The PC is still responsible for managing inherent site risks and interaction between multiple contractors. Absolutely. So I suppose just as a little bit of a last, I know we're a little bit ahead of time, but the performance review topic was always going to be a little bit more brief. But I suppose if people could just, in the chat section, if you could put, I just want you to put a word for what do you think is the major role of the principal contractor in respect of managing contractors. What is their role? So just a word that describes their role. So let's see. Yeah. Coordination, governance, coordination, compliance. That's an interesting one. Coordination, getting the end result. The compliance one I find quite interesting, because the question is always then compliance with what? Definite compliance with site safety rules. Definitely compliance with, you know, instructions issued by the principal contractor, but not compliance in terms of them managing their own risks. Coordination. So yeah, great. People have really, I think, cottoned on to the fact that the principal contractor has a very well-defined role in terms of coordinating what contractors are doing, making sure that they are aware of site risks, making sure that you know, there's communication and consultation between contractors, but it is not in terms of dictating how a contractor actually undergoes their specific technical work. So, look, as I said, in summary, I think that if we just go back to that slide there, then, you know, it really is clarifying that there is an absolute separation between a principal contractor and a contractor in terms of what each is controlling and what each is responsible for. Whereas in the past, there was an interpretation that a principal contractor was going to be held responsible for everything that happened on a site, no matter who was actually undertaking the work, whether it was an independent contractor or a principal contractor. And that is just simply not true anymore. and it actually hasn't been true for 100 years. So, you know, I think, I hope that you've got a lot out of the webinars, and I can't thank everyone enough for participating, and I hope that you found the sessions to be of value.